We're going to play a game.
Oh, no. Yay.
Yay. Speed round of theater terms.
Okay, all right.
We can edit all this out. All right, you ready?
Okay.
Proscenium.
Audience is out front and there's an arc and it's all forward-facing.
Sitz probe.
Musical theater term when the band is playing the music and you're singing.
This is my favorite one, ghost light.
Oh, empty theater. It's the single light that's in the space.
Why is it there?
Oh, there's so many stories, but I think the one that I resonate with is it's the spirits that are in the building that they actually need to see and that they're always with us. Yeah, it's a beautiful tradition.
Actors and creatives have never had this much power and tools at their disposal. Were you involved in the edit? How do you eat and do? Writing for me also is therapy. On this week's episode, we have Ansa Akyea, accomplished actor and cultural advocate. I'm your host, Ben Osterman, filmmaker and entrepreneur. Thank you for listening. Before we start, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. Swiss-born, Ghanaian American.
Wow.
That's not the average background for folks. Can you tell us a little bit about your backstory?
Man, this is scary. Oh yeah, no, this is great. So my parents are from Ghana, West Africa. I was born in Switzerland, born and raised there until I was 8 years old. So my first language is actually French. Spoke a little bit of Swiss German. I don't have much of it now. And my mother was a French teacher, so I couldn't get away from French until I went to formal school. My father worked for UNICEF. So every kind of had an army brat situation. Every 4 or 5 years we moved. The longest period was like when I was born, 7, 8 years in Switzerland, in Geneva, in a little neighborhood called La Gradelle. So I was there, and then my dad got a job with UNICEF, and we moved to Ivory Coast, another former French colony. And no need for English. I was just still in a French school. And then after that, he was posted in Liberia after Ivory Coast. And Liberia is an American, I guess, outpost and was never colonized. And it's got a very interesting history.
Right. Yep.
And so that was my first introduction to like a formal education of English. So I'm also the youngest, so it's my sister, my brother, and then me. So again, no need to learn formal English. But what I did do, I watched a lot of TV growing up. So I remember watching like a lot of dubbed American movies in French, which I don't recommend because a lot of subtleties and nuances are missed. You just, you're getting the general gist of dialogue. You're not getting the nuances, the cultural meaning, anything like that.
Clint Eastwood in French maybe doesn't work quite as well.
Exactly. Arrête-toi ici. It's like, what is he saying? It's not the same. And then after that, I ended up going to boarding school. So after Liberia, I ended up going to Canada, in Quebec, in right outside of Montreal.
So more French.
More French, French Canadian, which, between the French and the French Canadian, there's an also interesting tension there, right? Mm-hmm. I should say, in the interim between Liberia and Canada, my parents moved to Rwanda. And so, so the stories you hear about the genocide and the Hutu and the Tutsi and all that, that's when he was there.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and hence why he retired after that. I think he was really burnt out.
I would imagine.
Do you know what I mean? I think any human who goes through a thing like that, peripherally or directly, you're not the same, And so I remember visiting Rwanda before it became the way that it was, the genocide, full blown, and everything that you saw in that movie with Don Cheadle, Hotel Rwanda it was exactly like that. Do you know what I mean? And it's one of the most beautiful countries, most complicated histories, because it's also a former colony of Belgium and France, and it's just all these things that we're still dealing with.
Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, ended up in Canada, moved to Iowa, graduated, and then after that, it was parents are how do I say this? Child of immigrants, so it's all about education.
Yep.
Doctor, lawyer, right, business, whatever. But my parents loved the arts. My mother both my parents never kind of looked down on the arts or said that's not a profession. And so when I remember I took an elective in theater, and that was the beginning for me to kind of realize, I think I might want to do this, and the rest is history.
Were you kind of already outgoing at that point? Like you weren't afraid of, being in front of people?
Yeah. I wasn't so self-aware, but I also think it's because I had an army brat situation. So when you move a lot, you learn very quickly, like how to read your environment, how to, make connections and what you value, what you don't value, and or what people value as well, right? And so I think those are the things that still serve me to this day as a human being and as an artist. I can see it on the page, I can see it in the moment, and I trust that.
Yeah, I mean, you hear that consistently among a lot of successful actors who are army brats as well, because the constant moving, the constant having to make new friends, having to like perform, or get attention quickly, there's probably some thread there that's, yeah.
Yeah.
You must have been inspired to, or have been enthralled with the acting profession before that first class.
Yeah.
Did it just not seem like an option to you, or was that like a thing that you thought you might do at some point?
Yeah, no, it was not in the cards for me, honestly. It was very much become a teacher, like the things that were expected were some kind of functional service job, right? My sister ended up going to law school, right? My brother ended up going in the technology sector, and he's still doing that. They both are in their chosen fields. And for me, I always had an interest in how do you create something, right? And I just think for me, the arts was actually like, it's not, I don't want to say easy because it's not easy. It just made sense.
Yeah.
So I think after I took my mother, I remember, I keep talking about my mother because she's the one who really kind of like, if there was music or if there was like a performance or, because I think also because I was the youngest, right? So the last child kind of gets like dragged around a little bit more.
Yep.
Right. And so a lot of that came from my mother as well. And my father, I just remember growing up with the TV or the radio on all the time. The BBC was on all the time. So I always had something, and reading was a big thing in my family. And I mean, still is. But yeah, so I think that was my influence there.
Yeah. Your parents sound really impressive.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they still around?
Yeah. So it's... Thank you for asking. So my mother, is still with us. My father, it's funny, today marks the day that he passed.
Okay.
He had colon cancer, so he passed
Sure.
away. But he was absolutely like, I get his voice, his charm, and his humor from him.
Uh-huh.
And my mother, I get kind of my heart and my diligence of like loyalty and those kind of values and things like that. So
yeah. What a blessing.
Yeah.
What did he do for UNICEF?
Yeah, so he was the program regional program director.
Uh-huh.
So when he was in Ivory Coast, he was in charge of that particular region, and when Liberia, same thing, and then Rwanda was the one that was probably the most challenging, I think. And it's one of those things where he knew the things that were happening before everybody else knew, right? And so whether it was not just the ethnic cleansing or the genocide parts, but literally like how are people living, right? Like is the water clean, right? It's malaria thing. So UNICEF deals with children, and I think that's probably the part that resonated the most for him, his passion. So yeah, that's what I got from him.
Yeah, amazing. Mm-hmm. So back to the acting thing. You got your MFA from Iowa. Did you start working right away?
Yeah, I did. I mean, really,
good.
I did.
Okay, that's not the usual answer,
right? Yeah, no, I was really blessed, man. How do I talk about this? I think it was a little bit like the University of Iowa gave me a really good sense of new work, right? We're not like a conservatory or blah, 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 or classical theater. No, we don't do that. We do new work, right? In my class in particular in 2000, Go Hawks, when we graduated, it was that beautiful kind of like synergy between the playwrights, the new actors, and also new directors, right? And so the strongest kind of like confidence level I had was collaboration. Yeah. That was my thing. So I ended up having I guess what you call like a showcase, right? Mm-hmm. And where you invite agents and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Went to Chicago, ended up getting signed by Shirley Hamilton. Shout out to my agents. And then after that, I started working. Our first gig was at Steppenwolf collab with About Face Theater, which was amazing. It was awesome to be in Chicago doing that, right?
Steppenwolf, that's legit.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, I'll take that credit. Thank you very much. And then I had an agent. I had a great gig. And so then I just started working, met a lot of people. They have a version of the Playwright Center in Chicago. Russ Tutterow was kind of heading. He's passed since, but he was such a instrumental force as to like connecting people, like playwrights with artists, right? And it's also that thing, I'm sure you experience this, when someone is green or has like, I got all the tools, I got all the things, that energy.
Yep.
And they just want to deliver or just do the thing, right? And that's kind of how I approached Chicago. I was just like, I want to do everything. I want to do Steppenwolf. I want to do small storefront theater. I want to do festivals. I want to voiceover. So my agent was busy, just, But also, I think you learn rejection.
For sure. Yeah. That's like 90% of the job, right?
You just,
Yeah.
like it's, oh, wow. There are other people and other ways of being, and I have to own my stuff.
Did you take it personally the first handful of times? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you still?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Good.
No. Now here's the thing. For me, when I audition, I also audition the folks, right?
Yeah.
Do I actually want to be telling the story with you? And you get the vibe, and I know you can deny it all you want to, but your spidey senses never lie.
Yep.
And I'm at a space now where I am confident about what I'm feeling and thinking, and I've done my homework,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Having now probably casted 100 roles, I often can tell within the first 5 or 10 seconds, of like, okay, is this going to work? Is it not? But then also when it comes down to a choice and it's between a couple of people, it can be really arbitrary too. I mean, you've been on the other side of things now too. Sometimes it's like, what's the tiebreaker here? Like who's the right person for it? And sometimes it's like a coin flip. I mean, not literally, but like it's that close. So that person that really wanted it, like they were so close, and that's so heartbreaking for me because you want to work with that person because they brought something. You just can't. There's only so many roles to fulfill. So I think a lot of actors should work on something where they're casting, and they can see that side and how difficult or easy that decision can be, and maybe learn to make it a little less personal.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my experience in Chicago. Like I remember being sent out, and this is when they were, I guess, really thinking more about like what kind of how do we expand their representation envelope, right? And so oftentimes I'd be the only person of color in the space. And I always felt like whatever I do, I have to bring myself to it, right? And so if I'm trying to give them something, that's just complicated, right? And so like an example of that would be, I remember Jeremy Cohen, who's now at Ojai Playwright Festival. He was running a theater company, and his husband was doing his play, The Idiot Box. And I remember going in there and just like having fun, you know what I mean? And I think Jeremy saw like, oh, we never thought of that character that way, right? Mm-hmm. Not just because of my race, but because of like my connection to the text and the circumstances and all those like nuances that you want.
Yep.
So I think when it's that level of synergy, I'm hoping that you can't deny yourself. But then I've learned being on the other side is there all these other considerations, right?
Yep.
There might be managers, there might be agents, there might be schedules. Like some things you just can't move. And so now I don't take it personally. I'm just like, it's an experience. But I get a choice. That's the important thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you've put in the work. That's for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And now you are like directing and producing on stage as well.
Yeah.
How's that been? I mean, you've been doing that for a while, but like, do you like one or the other better?
I look to you sometimes because I think, we were having a conversation about like, what's your mission statement now? Like, and I realize at a point you've been there, done that. You kind of want to play with other folks. You kind of want to open the aperture up a little bit more. It's hard for me to say I like one more than the other. Directing, I think, is great, at least in the theater, because you do get to get out. How do I get out of your way? Right. I think that's, at least in theater, that's how I've experienced it. I've never done it, obviously, on film or TV, but the way I equate it also to the way that I've worked with you is very much like, here's what we're trying to go for. How can we get there? That's fun to me.
Yep.
Right. And you're not giving me a line reading, except if I really need it. Right. Or it's like, oh, okay, that unlocks me. But I mean, just by the fact that I'm getting excited talking about it, that's where I'm at now, where I'm trying to figure out how to get a thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, as an actor, I'm trying to sustain. I'm trying to do other things, so it's a different headspace.
Yeah, well, on the stage, like the text king, right?
Yep.
You can't change it. So it's really all about the performance. Where film, it's like about performance, but you have some malleability with the script itself to play around. So yeah, there's an interesting distinction there. I'd love to try stage someday, to like where you just kind of like the script is what it is, and you don't have to worry about it. You can focus on everything else. That seems freeing to me in a way. And obviously with the text itself, there's a lot of room in there to interpret and a lot of subtext underneath. But when you are performing, because you've done obviously a lot of theater work and a bunch of film and TV, do you, as an actor, come to the job differently depending on the medium?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I love what you're saying. Like, this is such a good conversation because I think people don't understand technique and talent in terms of like, how do you apply those things? Everyone's got talent, right? But technique, you can learn. That's great.
Yep.
And being in the field is probably the best level because, if you're saying, oh, this is a single shot, or this is a close up, I need to get in my toolbox and be like, okay, I gotta, be more subtle, or my voice, or just knowing that it's being recorded. Like, it's just all, to me, that's fun.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? I think on stage, you got to project, and you have to understand, is it a proscenium? Is it a thrust? Is it a Sunday matinee crowd, right? Like, you can calibrate a little bit, and is it the end of the week? Is my instrument a little tired? Is my partner not giving me what they did, yesterday? And how can I let go of that and be present, right? But all those things, man, is about being an artist, and that's ultimately, it's about your humanity, and it's about your ability to connect, right? So that space takes me out of judgment. You're not a good guy. I'm not the bad guy. I'm not blah, blah, blah. It's just like, what are we doing here? What's happening here, right? And that's fun, man.
Yeah. That stuff is so fascinating to me. Yeah. Can you walk us through how a play gets made? I know we're not going to, do the 2-hour version of that, but But the 2-minute version, starting with the text all the way to getting butts in seats, like, and you've been involved in a lot of that process. Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, I will speak of it from the actor perspective, and then I'll try to switch to the producer real quick. So from the actor perspective, it's, you see a listing, whether it's a union, non-union, whatever, your agent manager gives you the breakdown. Nowadays, you can get on Zoom and do the audition. I really think there's something about being in real time, whether you have it, the text in hand and you're playing with a reader. I think theater's a live medium. It's really easy to get caught up in what you see versus what is actually happening in the moment. So that happens. You audition. Hopefully you get a callback. You get cast. Then you start doing your work, right? And hopefully you've already read the play, so you kind of know a little bit about the given circumstances, all the kind of, what you think the arc of the character is. You get into the rehearsal room. Hopefully the director lets you know how we're going to play, how we're going to collaborate. And some are very hands-on. Some are like, you know what? Let's just see what happens here. But let's stick to the text, or to what you said earlier, right? And then, honestly, a lot of the work is at home. You're probably learning your lines, and you're finding operative words, and you're studying some other material, or you're thinking about blocking and things you want to try the next day. And then you got to sleep. That's the most creative time, man, because your brain actually kind of coalesces all that information and gives you a chance to kind of like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to try Act 1, Scene 2 on that line. I'm going to try this thing, right? And usually those are the building blocks to creating that. And then after, 4 or 5 weeks, you have an audience, which is another character you've got to kind of consider, because now you get responses and, oh, this is a laugh. They get a laugh here, and okay. And then you open, and then you close, and then you go in a corner and cry, and then you're like, what's wrong with me? Right? And all the people you missed come around, and they're like, where you been? And that's kind of it. On the producer side, I think you're thinking about the cost. I think you're always thinking about, are we selling out? And even if you're going to run at a deficit, what am I profiting? Am I putting a new title into the marketplace? Am I breaking somebody, into this market in terms of a director or light tech or whatever, right? And also, am I creating a good business relationship with my audience and also with my community, And I think those are things that are non-negotiable. You kind of, if an actor is kind of difficult to work with, that's your job. You gotta have the hard conversations.
Yeah. Are the theater companies in town, how do the economics work for them? I really don't know. And they might be all different. I know some probably are more grant focused, others maybe pull in outside investors. Is there a one size fits all, or how does that look?
That's such a good question. I think there is a traditional model, right? But I think we are so lucky in the Twin Cities that we have literally like Lord Theaters, and basically Lord is league of basically it's a group of theaters that operate with a certain kind of big budget, right? And they draw a lot of attention. And then you have a lot of kind of mid-size, and you have like CTCs, and you have like 10,000 Things and Mixed Blood Theater and Penumbra and History Theater, and the list goes on. And each of them, if they are union houses, have contracts, and they kind of have to abide by certain things for your pension, for your salary, and those are non-negotiables, right? Both on the technical side and then you have IATSE for the, right? So it kind of, all that is a machine, but you can always say, you know what, I'm going to go a different route and kind of like write my own script, or, pay a playwright and say I'm going to produce it myself and get my 5 friends and rent a space down in St. Paul and just do it yourself. There are no really like hard and fast rules. Like my wife went to Columbia for producing, so I'm sure she's going to hear this and be like, no, there are rules, sir.
Right.
But as far as in this marketplace, I think we benefit from the historical advantage of having audiences that are smart, right? At any point, you can go to Walker and see performance art, or you can go to the Guthrie and see like high art, or you can go to, I don't know, some festival somewhere and just kind of see, or theater in the round, like see what community theater looks like. Yep. All are good, all are valid. It's just, you got to pick your lane.
For the audience that isn't familiar with the Twin Cities theater scene, what makes it so special, in your opinion?
First time I came to the Twin Cities, I saw Dream on Monkey Mountain by Derek Walcott, and I think T. Michael Rambo was in it. Mm-hmm. It was a Sunday, and I was like, I don't know what's going on in Minnesota. All I knew was the Mall of America, and I went and I saw the show, and I was like, how did they do this? It was packed. It was the old Guthrie, right? And I just remember watching this play with these beautiful, Black folk kind of telling the story about colonialism and like oppression and struggle and all. I was like, how are they doing this up here in the upper Midwest? And I never heard of it.
White bread, Minnesota, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And no shade. I was just like, this should be in New York or Chicago or LA. And it kind of like blew my mind. And I just remember from that moment on, I was like, okay. And I found out Penumbra and the connection with August Wilson and, the Playwright Center and all the things. And I think what makes Minnesota also really, really special as an art incubator is that, again, I'll say this, like people actually pay for the artists. You can make a living here. It's not kind of like, now, of course, you're going to have to string together teaching artists gig and maybe a bunch of other things.
Be omnivorous. Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you can focus on theater and be fine. I think my experience in Chicago in that marketplace is like, there's TV, right? There's film. And so you can kind of really kind of spin upward and kind of dominate a lane real quickly, or voiceovers or commercials or whatever. And here, theater is king or queen, however you want to call it. But I think you get your chops here, and then everyone is really good. Yeah, really good. So, yeah.
Is everyone really good because everyone's really good? You know what I mean? Like you're all learning from each other, you're all pushing each other, you're collaborating, and it just kind of a rising tide lifts all boats, you think? Or did it probably started a long time ago, obviously, and just the tenor and the whatever's in the water here helps, but I have to imagine working next to so many talented actors makes you better.
Yeah. I mean, if you work next to like a Sally Wingert, you're gonna learn something. Do you know what I mean?
Or you're not paying attention.
Yeah, it's you. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the bar. Like, I'm thinking about like J-Dub or or myself. At this point, at my age, I'm like, you forget that students are watching you. You forget that people who are in your industry, directors, light designers, like they are also raising their bar based on how you are showing up, right? And I think you're right. It is much more collaborative and community centered in the Twin Cities. I think my experience in other markets has been very much like, I'm coming to dominate and y'all just, which is great. It's a lot of fun to just be like, excuse my language, I'm the shit and everyone's going to kind of follow me. But at a point, it ain't no fun at the top by yourself. You kind of want to have a party with other people. So, yeah.
Do you have any visions for like the future of your craft? Obviously, it's one of the oldest professions. Styles change, etc. But yeah, do you have any takes on where it might be going? Does it need to change? Does it need to evolve?
Yeah, it needs to change. I think, and some of this conversation is, all right. Some of it is leadership. I think some of it is board work. Some of it is also audience development. There's a whole new generation, like you said, COVID and George Floyd. I think young people are looking for spaces and places, and mental health is a real issue, right? And so there's a generation, like my kids have grown up with things that I didn't grow up with. So I cannot make the assumption that, I'm just going to do Romeo and Juliet. And they're not going to sit there and be like, how does that relate to what I'm going through now, right? And so if we want to be a relatively vibrant community that uses art to not just deal with societal functions, but also like, how do we capitalize on art, right? How do we make money off of this thing to sustain ourselves without having to look like LA or New York and like what makes us us? Things have to change, right? And so I think it's a very layered conversation, and I wouldn't want to be like, we need more film and
right.
actors go to, no, but
Here's
I think all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've been having the conversation, and I think some people are going to have to go because what they're holding on to is something that is not about the future. It's a recalcitrant, small, me and mine. And I think, the way I met you in film was this beautiful kind of like offer. It was like, you got the chops in theater. I want to try this thing in film. Could we have this conversation? So I think a lot of it is generational. Like we just have to start opening up our windows, not just doors, just like what's going on? How could we expand the envelope? That's interesting to me, but maybe I'm alone.
Do you see audiences changing?
Yeah. I mean, during the pandemic, all we did was watch, Netflix or Disney Plus, right? Mm-hmm. There was not enough content to go around. Mm-hmm. So anytime somebody says like art or sculpture or any form, film, TV, do not balk at that. Like the next challenge is going to be, how can you create? Like the fact that we're even having this conversation, I know was born out of a frustration for you, right? Like I want to have different kind of conversations. There are no limits. There are no ceilings. And sure, we might not have all the money yet, but we've got to create what that innovation incubator can look like. And until you see it, you just don't believe it, right? And so I think in the Twin Cities, we are in a really interesting position to have that conversation be really manifested. I don't want to say Target and Best Buy, but yes, there's a corporate culture here that can sustain the arts in a way that meets all the things that I've said.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And can we do that in a way where we're not serving those corporate folks to keep, the money faucet open?
Right.
Because that can sometimes, I think, poison, your art. And maybe it's just, no strings attached, great. But yeah, sometimes I feel like our reliance upon the corporate overlords or the philanthropical folks, makes us, change how we view our own art. We're trying to make it please them versus ourselves or, our audience.
Yeah. And, history bears that out, right? Even Shakespeare had somebody, paying him to write a thing about them, right? And so you're absolutely right. And that tension has been played out throughout history. So I think the conversation to me is not not about just money. I think we just have to be honest and say, how are we only capitalizing? Here's what I usually use as my barometer. My mentor, when I was coming up, used to say, theater does three things, or good theater should do three things. It should entertain you, it should educate you, and it should enlighten you, right? And if our corporate overlords want to entertain us alone, it is our job and our responsibility to push back and say, great, how about these other two things, right?
Yeah.
Are we educating our next blah, blah, blah? That's for us to make that case. And I think a lot of folks, when you open up the aperture and you expand the table is kind of I guess the metaphor I would use, you get different voices at the table. They'll be like, you know what? As a single Black woman who blah, 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 what would be great would be like bus fare, and again, I'm not saying that's the thing, but I'm saying you got to hear from different people to kind of realize, oh my God, this is low hanging fruit, or, okay, this is more strategic, but we got to build it. It's a little bit like Field of Dreams. Like, you got to build it.
Yeah. Do you have any tips or habits that have contributed to your success? Any idiosyncrasies, maybe, anything that comes to mind?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I think number one is you need a professional ego. You need to understand that you are really good and you're worthy to be in these spaces, as a director, as an actor, as a playwright, as a screenwriter. Like, you kind of own your stuff. You know what I mean? And it doesn't mean that you know everything, but you are someone to be trusted, and you seek that level of intimacy in terms of like, hey, how can we make this thing happen? And you and I both know what that's like when you're on set and you've been there for 12 hours and you're punch drunk and one more shot, or we're losing the light, and everyone kind of locks in, and it's, man, we're doing the damn thing. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm talking about, professional ego. The other part of it, so I think there's that. I have I think a healthy professional ego where I don't like to make apologies for the fact that I know my stuff. And when I make a mistake, cool. Like, I grew up doing Michael Jordan and the Detroit Bad Boys, right? So for me, it's like, let's get it on, let's go. Yep. And we don't need to shake hands at the end of the game. Like, just let's play the game, let's go. So I think there's some of that. And I think the other thing that served me well is please and thank you. Like, I do think you have to come with some humility and respect, because this too shall pass. You're not the end all be all. As much as I love Battleship Potemkin or Orson Welles, those are just records of their achievements, right? And there are going to be other great movies, Goodfellas, and the list goes on and on. So please and thank you. Have a healthy professional ego and understand that you need others. The other thing that I think has served me well is some ignorance, just.
Oh, you have to have it in art. Yeah. Oh, the more the better in some ways.
Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
That looks like fun. Let me try this thing, right? Because I don't know I don't want to get into the psychotherapy of it, but I think there's a little bit of that, risk be damned. I kind of want to do this thing and see how it goes.
Yep.
And then, I think because I've gotten older, I think also take time to appreciate what you've got. I was talking to my son yesterday. I was like, I'm your biggest fan. I watch him and I'm like, man, I don't think I was as cool as you at your age, and he was like, what exactly do you mean by that? And I'm just like, yeah. It's same thing with my daughter. I'm in absolute awe of this generation and what they're able to do. So expand the table, man. Make space for them. That's it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Do you have any lessons from any losses or setbacks? None? Zero? Never lost?
Yeah. Try not to date your co-stars.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's messy. It's just messy. I know it feels good in your mind. It might be something you're like, yeah, and then we're going to be fine. Mm-hmm. It never ends up well. Let it be work and let it be honor that. Yeah. And it's also about boundaries. You don't want to miss the moment. So that's that one.
I would imagine, on a film set, and I would imagine it's similar to, a run of a play. Those relationships are so intense and you get to know people so quickly because you're spending so much time with them and you're being vulnerable together, right? That you can just see that happening so quickly. It's like a summer camp thing, right? Where everyone's your best friend, and then 3 months later it's like, oh, I haven't seen that person, I haven't talked to him, and it might be years, right? It's such a weird, bizarre thing that happens in that kind of creative crucible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you nailed it. I think that's exactly it. It's such a the college word is ephemeral. That's what I use in theater. It's like, it's an ephemeral art. Like, you see it and we're done. Like, it's just weird. We change space and time, and we time travel a little bit, and then we're back in 2024. Do you know what I mean? So that you want to honor and respect that enough to not get caught up in like, this moment should always be this way. That can be tricky.
Yeah.
The other piece of advice I think that I still apply in my life is learn something new. You know, when I walk away from this moment, I'll be like, what did I learn today? Like, actually ask yourself, what did I learn today? Did I show up as my authentic self? Was there a moment where I was like, let me hide behind, you know what I mean? And this is it. This is the life you got, you know what I mean? So, yeah, what did I learn today, and how do I apply that to whatever's next? And then also stop being scared. It's not serving you. You know, the things that you worry about the most are usually because you didn't turn the light on and see like, oh, it was my sock.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
what's the Buddha saying? Like, why suffer twice?
yeah.
Yeah, I really like that one. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
You know, and it takes time to learn that, I'm sure. You know, everyone's on a journey. It's all good. But you do not know what the other person sitting across from you is dealing with. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So when you're so busy in your head and making up scenarios, they're just like, you know.
Right. Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No. Yeah. That's perfect. Let's do a hot take. Do you? What's your spiciest industry hot take that you are willing to share publicly?
I think theater should do a better job of marketing itself with technology. It's almost like I thought it was one thing, and you get in there, it's a whole other experience, baby. You know, I think people want to be surprised and thrilled and moved, and I think we do a very bad job of, and some of it I will name this way. Unions also need to be responsive to that. I think there's some of that. It's a little bit like, yeah, I think unions can improve the way that we create the circumstances for people to come to our industry.
Sure.
I also think that creatives have to do a better job of keeping it simple. We talk so much and we don't show enough, right? We don't show up for each other. You know, we talk about, yeah, in the future, but we don't do it. We just talk about it. And I think that's frustrating for me. And sometimes I get caught up in that. It's fun to just ideate all day, you know, but what are we doing? And then remember that the world is big, man. Like I said, when I grew up, I watched dubbed American films. Somebody had to take the time to close caption it or whatever it was, or dub over it. So there are other stories, there are other ways of being that you actually are available to you. And so we gotta open the windows and open up a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm excited for what the new generation is going to bring, because we need it desperately.
And they don't care. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what we're talking about is us realizing in hindsight and having the wisdom of articulation. They're in the moment. Like, they can create their own ways, and they will. They will use the technology to tell different stories. And I think, to your point, I would hope that the industry is also noticing that you do need different folks at the table, right? Like, so I was having a conversation, I think was an executive who was saying there was a point in the industry where it was an engineer was going to be the CEO or whatever, right? Because they kind of came up through the ranks and they kind of knew the business. And now we have accountants, and they're just, to your point, they're just looking at numbers. They're very good at what they do, but they don't know the art of it. They do not know what it's like to see a call sheet or get, you know, a rewrite, and then you got to reshoot or whatever it is. They don't know that. They just know I'm over budget.
Yeah. The spark's not there. Yeah.
It's not.
The human magic part's not there. Yeah.
You know, and we've been in those situations where the producer and whoever they're, you know, the people who are paying for the thing show up and they're like, I had no idea. Yeah, you had no idea. Yeah. That is literally what you're paying for this trust to happen, right? And so I really wish, and and I don't mean this lightly, I wish more folks got out of their ivory towers and came down and did what you do. And you realize, like, man, I haven't eaten since, right? Or
Yeah.
like, it's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I've noticed that with my own stuff too. And I for the first time, I'm taking an intentional break from writing and developing. Yeah. I just got to this point where I realized that, I was, working on projects or writing stuff that I thought the folks with the money would support. And you kind of have to, because film is expensive. But that's not why I got into it. I got into it, as a version of like self-expression and to create something from nothing. So taking this kind of purposeful pause has given me a little bit of a cleansing, and I'm like, okay, so I can go back to that world, but now I have a little bit more context. Saying, okay, if I do it, it's for that reason, or if I just do something purely for the art's sake, I know the difference now. And for a while, it was like kind of merging and morphing, and it was starting to feel a little gross. But yeah, they both need to work. We just have to find the thing that sustains us.
Where are you with that? I'm curious, because that passion thing, I can only see what I see. So
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, the economics of film right now are atrocious. It hasn't been this bad in a very long time, partially because COVID trained all the viewers to watch things on a handful of platforms.
Yeah.
So you used to be able to make an independent movie and rely on VOD and DVD, those sorts of things. Those are kind of gone. Now it's all streaming. And for a while, the streamers were acquiring movies, meaning you could make something on spec. And if it's, a good subject matter, you had some name talent in it, there were buyers for it. Now all these streamers and studios are just developing in-house. So they're not purchasing, independent films that were kind of made, out of passion and on spec. And I've really never been interested in doing the development game in Hollywood. I mean, I did it for a while, but you work with a production company, you work with a studio, and it can be years. And you can get out of it and have nothing to show for it. And I'm like, I'm not interested in that. And God bless the people that can do that. I can't. I need to be actively making stuff. So we're just kind of in this weird spot as an industry trying to figure it out. And then, the strikes didn't help. So a lot of crew members are on the precipice of having to switch careers, which sucks. But again, storytelling, is going to come back. We still need it. How do we survive as a community? How do we tell our stories? How do we introduce new stories and new voices? And I think, that's where the audience is going to be anyway. So let's just lean into that a lot harder right now, and get over this kind of weird, awkward in-between phase.
So I'm so resonating with what you're saying, because I'm sure you know the history of film, like Louis Lumiere and all that stuff, right? But there was a time when we were looking at like German, Italian, French, right? Like these were the leaders of the movements that we inherited. And to your point, I don't think, I think after World War I and II, American kind of like cinematography kind of took off.
Yep.
So I think you're right. I think something's about to happen. And that's why I keep saying, like, we need to pay attention to the rest of the world, because I think while we're having these really powerful, and we're seeing the deleterious effect of AI in so many aspects, because it's happening in theater too. People just said, F it, I'm just going to go work at make my money and take care of myself. I can't do the art.
Yep.
There are other markets that are emerging that, like, I'm looking at Nigeria, I'm looking at Ghana, I'm looking at in Indonesia, I'm looking at India, Bollywood, and I see what they're doing, and they're not having the same conversations we're having. They're like, how can we actually ramp up production? And I'm not suggesting that we should all, pivot and do what they're doing, but I'm saying we are going to have a cultural crisis because we have not taken care of home base.
Yep.
We've just not prepared it.
Yeah. I mean, again, only on the film side,
Yeah.
I can speak with any, expertise, but we've been eating McDonald's for the last 20 years.
So,
and you can survive, you can't thrive eating fast food all the time. Love a good Marvel movie, nothing wrong with that. But, we need those stories that are a little bit deeper, that kind of expose the human experience or make us learn something or make us feel uncomfortable. People have a hard time feeling uncomfortable right now. And, storytelling is the one place where you should, it's much better to, sit around the campfire and learn about the saber-toothed tiger, than having to actually face the saber-toothed tiger, right? Like, the stories are there for a really good reason, and I feel like we're just watering them down to the point where we're not getting as much value as we used to. But I do think a lot of the interesting stuff right now is kind of happening on YouTube and TikTok. I think that's where the younger generation is, and it's cheap and it's accessible. So I think paying attention to what's happening there, and hopefully bringing some of those voices into the long form, because I think you can only do so much in a couple of minutes.
Yep.
But I think, we're kind of in that weird, like I said, awkward phase of like technology and audience habits and all of that. And something good will come out of it, but hopefully we don't have to wait too long to figure that out.
Yeah. And I think, again, if you look at film history, like the star system also got broken, right? Like the folks that we think of are no longer there. The Hollywood star system is broken, to your point. Like, he can get on TikTok, and my son probably knows 5 or 6 people on Twitch or whatever that I have no idea.
Yep.
Right. And I have it every day. I'm like, how did they get 5 million followers? And what does that mean? And all that is beyond me. But I'm saying those folks also have access to the Marvel movie all of a sudden. Now I'm like, how did they end up in a Marvel movie? And I'm over here, trying to do Othello in the prison for, right. So they're
bleeding on stage. Yep.
It don't make no sense, man. Yeah. So part of it, but to your point, I also think it's easy to project, right, and look at other things and be like, man, when part of it is having the discipline. And I love what you said. Sorry, I'm not finishing my sentences. When you said you took the time and you pulled back and you kind of figured out, why am I doing this? Because it's getting a little messy. I think we all are gonna take some time out at some point. I had to take some time out. It's like, actually, I want to direct. I want to learn about producing. I'm good with the acting for now. And when it comes back in a way that's authentic and genuine and I can connect with it, then I'll get back into it. In the meantime, let me get on the board. Let me do this. Let me talk to my peers and let me apologize. Let me repair relationships. Let me create new ones. Like, let me figure some stuff out.
Yeah.
I think it's still a human journey. I think that's it at the end of the day.
Well, I mean, being well-rounded and feeling like you've done the rest of that work can only make, your how you practice your craft better, right?
You would think, right?
You'd hope.
Yeah. But to your point about AI, that you're right. Like, it will only replicate so much of what you give it and give you a version of the thing that you think you want. It is a mirage in some ways, right? And so, to your point, that work has to happen of us kind of like figuring ourselves out.
Yeah.
It'll happen, but, or not.
Yeah. Insert Michael Jackson popcorn gift. Yeah,
right.
For sure. For sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. Any TV, film performance that you've seen recently that really stood out?
Oh, man. That's a good question. Oh, I know it got a lot of flack, but what is the one about the Nazi camp?
Oh, Zone of Indifference.
Zone of Indifference.
No, is it Zone of Indifference?
Zone of Interest.
Zone of Interest.
Thank you.
Zone of Interest.
My God, that was really powerful. And I'm not smiling because I'm like, it was great.
It
I'm
is.
saying like, I was like, okay, yeah, I get it. And it didn't pander. It just kind of went there and stayed there, and you could see all aspects of what was happening to him and his. I like movies like that. It kind of reminded me a little bit like the American History X right, where it's kind of like black and white and boom, 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 very powerful.
It made you feel uncomfortable.
Extremely uncomfortable.
We're gonna play a game.
Oh no! Yay!
This should be easy for you, and hopefully I can pronounce all these correctly. We're speed round of theater terms.
Okay, all right. Let's see.
Ready? No pressure.
Professional egos kicking in. I'm sorry.
We can edit all this out. All right, you ready?
Okay.
Proscenium.
The stage, the arc front, audience is out front, and there's an arc, and it's all forward facing.
I might pronounce this wrong. Sitzprobe?
Sitzprobe. Singing, a musical theater term when the band is playing the music and you're singing.
Yep. Aside.
Aside or A-side?
A-side.
It's a cutting from the scripts that you are using in your audition. You're using a side of the script.
And is there an aside?
An aside, which is a Shakespeare term. Romeo doesn't know this is happening. Oh, say, where... Yeah, so you're doing an aside. You're speaking to the audience, and then you're back in the scene.
Love it. Invited dress.
Invited dress. A very technical way of saying, I'm not ready to show you everything yet, so I'm going to invite certain people to come and see. And usually it's the designers, their friends, some family friends, whatever, just to come and see where we are at and gauge where the production's at.
Is that like the step before like a soft opening?
Yeah.
I got it. Wet tech. I'd never heard that one before.
A wet tech.
Yeah.
The only way I will describe a wet tech, I think from my experience, a wet tech is literally when you're using water and you have to just, make sure that all the elements work. Number one, at Mixed Blood, we had a scene where we had water on the stage. And so you want to make sure the actors are safe and the water's actually working and things like that.
Yeah. Awesome. This is my favorite one, Ghost Light.
Oh, empty theater. It's the single light that's in the space.
Why is it there?
Oh, there's so many stories, but I think the one that I resonate with is, it's the spirits that are in the building that they actually need to see and that they're always with us. Yeah, it's a beautiful tradition.
Yeah, and I mean, theater folks are a little superstitious about stuff too, right? Yeah. And any other superstitions that you can think of?
Oh, I mean, there's the... I'll say the word it starts with an M, ends with an H. It's a Shakespeare play. So you don't want to say that title in the theater. I think it's
I didn't know this one, huh?
Yeah, it's bad luck.
You're not supposed to say good luck, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, good luck is not good luck. Don't do that. Don't say that. Yeah, or yeah. It's a rehearsal, not a practice. Right, and you're rehearing what you've practiced, which is why you have to rehear it.
Rehearsal. I like that. I had never thought anything beyond the actual word before. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of another one. I think those. Sometimes you have a costume parade where you have to kind of wear your costume before you do the thing. I think it's. And this might be from the costume world, so I'm not quite sure, but I think it's not good luck to keep the costume on longer than you're supposed to. I think it's a practical thing, but that's also it's not. Your character lives in. Once you put that character on, literally as a costume, it becomes part of your life. So you don't want to just keep that on.
Do you personally have any rituals?
Yeah, I like to come early. I like to leave quickly. I believe in warm-ups, even if it's film or TV or voiceovers. I think your instrument is just you have to be the vessel. And low-key, I've seen you be that as well. Like I see you kind of go into your zone. I'm like, okay, yeah. I believe in that. I believe in treating your body like you treat your spirit, right? And I also believe that there is a God. No matter what you believe, there is a bigger force than you. And the art is always in communication with that spirit. When you honor it, I'm going to get emotional. It gives you everything.
Yeah.
It will give you everything. And you might not even know it, what you need in the moment, but it's happening. You know what I mean? And so you got to be in touch with that.
Yeah. There's a saying, if you let the universe know what you want, she will conspire to make it happen.
Baby. Amen, brother. That's right. That's right.
All right, back to the game.
Yes.
That was great. Raked stage.
Oh, it's an angle. It refers to the degree to which there's a pitch on you're playing, and which allows in a proscenium for the audience to see a little bit more of the action versus a flat.
Yeah, but back on your first one, stage left, stage right is always confusing to me.
Yeah.
And we have camera left, camera right. It's confusing. But what is stage right and stage left? Is that the audience or is that the performer?
It depends where. If I say, Matt, please move to your stage right, I am referring to your left. If you say, do you want me to move stage left or stage right? I'm thinking of your left and your right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's always from the perspective of the person speaking.
Yeah. Perfect. Set dressing.
Set dressing. Anything that's, that I guess not a prop, but I think anything that is an ornament or that's on the set. Yeah.
Yep. Same as film. Pit.
Oh, pit, where the musicians are typically in musical, even though just straight play, but where they actually are at the bottom. Sometimes they're bottom, they're up there, whatever.
You can call the pit up there too, like they're.
I've seen it called a pit, but
I don't know. Yeah.
Traditionally, it's the front.
Right. Ding ding, good job. You pass. That was fun. I learned a few things there. Okay. I know you do a lot of work leading and facilitating education around racial equity and discrimination. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So I am. I work as a facilitator and coach, and I work in diversity, equity, and inclusion is what we call it. But what we really do is we move folks from one place to another in their own journeys. You don't know what you don't know until you know what you know, right? Yep. And so part of it is, how do you get in those circumstance situations? And that's really what I do. Is I work with an amazing CEO. Her name is Sina Hodges. She's the founder of the Woke Coach, which was founded, shortly before the murder of George Floyd. But it's always been on her heart to kind of move in an anti-racist, because I think as we're racialized, even though we're all humans in the U.S. context, it's important for us to reckon with that so that we can actually get beyond that. But until we do that, we're just tiptoeing around it and dancing in the system and not really knowing.
Yeah. And how's that been? Has it been?
It's been. I struggle to say great, but it's the kind of work where you see a lot of frustrated people because they didn't learn that in school, or they're married to someone, whether their faith is different or their gender is different or their ideologies around life is different, that all we really want to do is connect. And we are only the sum of our lived experiences. And so when you put on a system of oppression or what feels like historically, like I don't know how to deal with, sexism or racism, but you actually do. You can take very precise steps to dismantling it in your own life first before you worry about other people. Just worry about yourself. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? And so it's going well. And I think some companies have bought into that. The workforce is changing. I'm sure, your family members or your kids who are like, I'm going to take a flex day or a mental break. Like my parents didn't have that.
No.
Right. And so we're having different conversations for a different time and to meet a new workforce. Yeah, it's needed.
Woke used to mean one thing and it's now kind of evolving.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have any insight into how that term maybe has been like co-opted?
Yeah. The CEO of the Woke Coaches has a beautiful way of saying it, but woke has been around for, I won't say centuries. It was used, I'll work forward, backwards. It was used by Childish Gambino and Erykah Badu in songs and whatnot. It was also used as a way of saying you don't want to go to sleep because you don't want what happened to the Scottsboro Boys, which is a case that basically talks about having a trial of your peers, right? Scottsboro Boys is a case whereby some youths were basically accused of raping a white woman and they never got out of the system. But we also found out that she told a lie. Mm-hmm. So being woke, quite frankly, is just the opposite of being asleep, mm-hmm. right? And it's our responsibility to be aware and awake to other people so that we can actually engage with what we're trying to fix. And when you don't want to have conversations around gender, race, whatever it is, religion, you are going to sleep. Mm-hmm. And you're actually doing yourself a disservice because you're not bringing yourself to a space where you can actually make a change,
mm-hmm. Yeah, you can have the blinders on, whether on purpose or that's just how we were raised and that's your environment, but you can take them off.
It's a choice. Yeah. And I think to your question about being co-opted, I think it's about fear, mm-hmm. right? I can only imagine that if I speak about my experience, my lived experience as I'm racialized as Black, I would hope that you can resonate with a moment of, I've felt a version of that. I don't know what that is like for you, but I've had it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's really what it is. I think
Empathy.
empathy. Yeah, you use that word. Thank you. It's emotional intelligence. It's empathy.
Yeah.
So it's been co-opted. I think because out of fear and out of like, we got to ban books and whatever. Okay.
Yeah. Are you feeling any like political or external pushback with what you're doing, or
no?
That's awesome.
The smartest thing that our CEO did was she said, "I'm only working with people who want to work." And there's a lane for the other thing where you got to go and fight, but you'd be amazed at how many people say, "Hey, great, we understand equality. What's equity?"
Right.
You know what I mean? We understand a glass ceiling. What is, pay equity looks like.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And those are really exciting clients. And and they're all in, I don't want to say all, but the majority of them are in Minnesota, right? Because we also recognize that historically we've not done a good job, whether you look at the murder of George Floyd or Native Americans and indigenous rights, that it's been here the whole time. And that is not to negate what people who are racialized as white have gone through, but that's a different conversation.
Yep.
That historically, even white folks have been duped into thinking, I got to fear you, right? Because you're going to take something away from me.
Yeah.
Right? And there's enough for everyone.
Yeah. It's not a zero sum. Yeah.
Amen. That's
Yeah.
it.
Well, it's funny. It's like if you look at like history, it's not like this history of progress. It's
Come on, Deacon.
yeah, right. And
For
so
real.
we're dealing with some of that right now, and it's a little messy and probably a little frustrating. But as long as it keeps going like that way,
Yeah.
you will get there. All right. Knock on wood.
Yeah. Yeah. And we also don't want to be an island, right? Like I see what's happening in Minnesota and legislation feels really, really good. And but at the same time, I'm like, well, we look around, Iowa, Wisconsin, Dakotas, and it pains me that other people cannot live their full potential.
Yeah.
And however you believe,
Yeah.
it is not my job to tell you how to live your life.
Yeah.
I have got to do everything I can to make sure that your moment on this earth is maximized.
Yeah.
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 That's it.
Yeah. Do you get any solace or confidence knowing that you're on the right side of history, at least?
Oh.
Maybe you don't think that way.
You know what? No, I try not to think that way because I remember that, and I'm only speaking from my own experience, that Martin Luther King was once hated.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And now we can't have MLK Day without like I have a dream or whatever. But we have to remember that he was thoroughly hated, right? The same way that people who object to wars are like, how are you a conscientious objector, Muhammad Ali? How does that work, right?
You hate America.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
You know,
No, I love America. Yeah.
and the same thing for even white folks who stood up and said like, hey, we can do better when it comes to religion or, and protecting people who don't have what we've got.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's really what it is. How are you using your power and your privilege for the benefit of others? Because it comes back in amazing ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
know?
Pausing here real quick.
Sure.
How else can we use our power and privilege here to any other aspect of that you want to talk about that would be interesting to share?
How else can we use our power and privilege? I think start with what you've got. If you're an able-bodied person, imagine the analogy I said, try using your opposite hand for a day. See how that goes. And realize that people who are differently abled than you are, whether you open a door for them or you install a ramp for them or that changes your relationship. We talk about this all the time. The ADA, the American Disabilities Act, wasn't passed as a piece of legislation until the 90s, right? And so before that, and when we look at history, those people who were marginalized because they were different, because of different literally physical ability, were pushed to the margins. They didn't have access to schools. They didn't have access to medicine, right? And the same thing happens the moment we talk about difference. And that's the seed of hate, right? It is not some alien coming in, and it is us, right? And so that's the hardest thing.
It's calling from inside the house.
That's right. The calls come. That's well said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So start with yourself. What are the things that you were raised with, and you can always add more. Is what I always say. And I am no different. Being in this country, creates an animosity whether I want to or not, because I'm like, I've been raised to think that, ooh, the cops are going to kill me. Well, actually, no. If I do everything I can to make sure that interaction is, they want to go home just like I want to go home. Mm-hmm. If I can find the humanity in that moment, we can have a different level of interaction. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I think we're not creating circumstances where we can have that.
Yeah.
And these are historical things. That's the other part, Matt, that if you're born in 2020, you only have 4 years of learning about racism, right? Mm-hmm. Something that happened 200, 300 years, 400 years, we can keep going back. You're not going to solve it in your lifetime, but you can make it better for yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's in a very selfish way.
Well, at the very least, you can learn about it, which will subtly influence how you live your life, right? Because you're learning. I mean, you're becoming more woke, I guess.
There's a version of that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, thank you. This was incredible.
Thank you.
If people want to pay attention to what you're doing or find out where you're next, where can they go?
Yeah. In the work, I would say follow the Woke Coach at wokecoach.com. There's a book. It's amazing. It's awesome. We're also in the Twin Cities business. There's a column in there. And for me, my work as an artist, right now I'll be at Mixed Blood for maybe another month or so. And then we're doing a show up at Full Range, which is going to be in Virginia and Chisholm and Evelyn, so that whole area, so people can come in and check that out. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to be directing, some other things, hopefully in the future. And I think we were talking about this, but I'm going to probably get back to acting in a minute here. So.
Yeah, you better.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I mean, I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks again. This was amazing.
Same, Matt. Keep doing what you do. I say this with so much honor and praise. I'm so proud of you. You're blazing a trail in the Twin Cities, and I think nationally and internationally, I think this is a model, man. So I thank you for having me on.
All right,
Appreciate you.
Cut before they see me cry.
Yes.
All right.